Hello humans, and welcome back to Black History Highlights. Today we're talking about this gentleman in the picture right here by the name of Nat Turner. I figured it might be a little useful to hear the discussion questions before we get started, but if you don't want the story is spoiled, skip ahead to this time point right here. And then you can come back and listen to the questions, or I'll put them in the description below. Okay? So I have quite a few today because these got me thinking, and I went through actually a few of these questions with my Black History Club after school, and the students really enjoyed them and actually had a lot to say. So here are your questions. The first, a lot of them don't have specific answers. They're more discussion questions. A couple are fact-based questions. So it should be good to get a discussion going. The first is, what did white people think of black people in the 1800s? Second, how did Nat Turner's rebellion change or reaffirm what white people thought about black people? 3, what repercussions did Nat Turner's rebellion have on black people? What lasting impression did this and other slave rebellions have on American society? How was the Bible used by slave owners, and how was it used by those who were enslaved? Why was it important to deny people of color the ability to read? How are we still affected by the cultural effects of slave rebellions? Think about guns and think about education. Did Nat Turner hate white people? What was the purpose of such incredible brutality? And do you think he needed to kill women and children? So, let's hit that title card, and then I'll be back with the history of Nat Turner. A little bit of background about what is happening around the time of Nat Turner's life. Okay, so we have an emancipation movement kind of underway in Virginia. So there are two main reasons that people believe that there should be emancipation. One, they are against slavery as an institution, or two, they're against the slave trade, saying that the movement of peoples is overly harsh and brutal. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind. So in the, I'll say the 1815-ish to about 1830-ish, people are still really pressing, hey, let these people go. Okay, so in 1800, on October 2nd, Nat Turner is born in Southampton County, Virginia, to his mother Nancy and his father. They were possessed by Benjamin Turner. The majority of people in Southampton County, Virginia were enslaved black people, and the minority were the white people that owned them. Okay, his father is believed to have escaped slavery when Nat was young. We don't exactly have a year for that. Nat learned to read and write, and he learned about religion at a young age. He was considered to be of natural intelligence and quickness of apprehension, surpassed by few, unquote. As a boy, Nat spoke of events and described them, though they happened before he was even born. And because of this and his natural intelligence and some marks that were on his chest, his mother and grandmother said that he was someone intended for a great purpose. And it wasn't just his mother or grandmother who said this, it was the other people in that community. In 1810, at 10 years old, Benjamin Turner died, so Nat became the property of Benjamin's brother, Samuel Turner. Nat, in general, was a very religious kid, and man, in fact, and spent most of his time praying, fasting, and reading the Bible. In fact, in his confession, he even says that he would spend time in the field when he could focus on his prayer. He would pray in the field. He didn't stop and kneel to pray, but he kind of prayed as he worked. Yes, and sometimes he would kind of if I don't stop yawning, I will never get through this video. Sometimes Nat would go and spend time in the forest and fast and pray and just do that. He did not keep a lot of company with the other people in his area, just because when he was younger, they had used his intelligence to plan schemes of stealing, and since he didn't want to be involved in that, he kind of kept himself away from everybody. So in 1821, Nat ran away from an overseer on Samuel Turner's plantation. 30 days later, he returned after having had a vision where the spirit told him to return to the service of his earthly master. Most of the people in that community thought he had run away to freedom just like his father. In 1822, Samuel Turner died, and Nat was sold to Thomas More. So 22, 3 different people, lots of people dying. In the 1820s, Nat became a preacher and a leader of enslaved peoples in the area around Southampton plantations. He did this through being hired out as a preacher, so he would either go by himself or be brought, I don't know, to locations and would speak to the enslaved people there. In 1824, while working in the field, Nat saw lights in the sky and prayed to know what they meant. In 1825, he had another vision of a very bloody fight between black and white spirits. In 1828, but again, he asked to know what this meant. In 1828, at about March 12th, Nat heard a loud noise from the heaven, and the Spirit appeared and said to him, quote, "The serpent was loosened, and Christ had laid down the yoke he had borne for the sins of men, that I should take it and fight against the serpent." The message meant that Nat should, quote, slay his enemies with their own weapons, unquote. And the Spirit mentioned that it should be secret until the time came that he should reveal it to people. Probably that there should be a sign. Somewhere between 1829 and 1830, Thomas More dies, yet another death, and his widow remarries Joseph Travis. Nat is moved to the Travis property in 1830, and he is officially the property of Putnam More, Thomas More's son. In 1831, there's a solar eclipse in February, and Nat took this as the sign he'd been waiting for, and he confided in 4 highly trusted friends, Henry, Hark, Nelson, and Sam. They planned the rebellion for July 4th, but in July, Nat is sick from all of the planning and thinking and all that good stuff, and so they have to postpone. One of my students remarked, "How on earth can you get sick from thinking?" I assume that if somebody's in really deep thought about something, they tend to neglect their body. You even see this in the case of Einstein, where it says that he needed to be reminded to eat and to shower and to care for himself because he was so in thought. So I would say a similar thing applies to Nat, but he was still having to work in the fields, so he was exhausting his body, probably wasn't eating as well or sleeping as well as he should have, and that led to his illness around in the beginning of July. In August of that same year, 1831, the sun appeared bluish-green. This could have been from eruptions of Mount St. Helens, which was erupting intermittently from 1831 to 1857. Nat took this as his final sign, and on August 21st, Nat and 6 other men had dinner in the woods while they planned. At 2 a.m., at approximately 2 a.m., they set upon the Travis household, killing all of the Travises while they slept. They used blunt objects from field work, swords, rocks, things like that. And they traveled from house to house, killing white people and collecting arms and horses. So eventually, as they moved, most of the men ended up on horseback. They used still the swords and hoes and other blunt objects still because they did not want to alert the other people around by shooting off guns, which, as we all know, are fairly loud. Eventually, they had about 40 men armed with guns and swords and on horseback. And they gathered all these items from the people that they killed and objects that they found and made their way towards Jerusalem, Virginia, where there was an armory. It's about 8 miles from the center of Southampton County. Did they go into every single home and kill every single person? No. Some homes were spared. And they were spared because Nat said that the poor white people there thought themselves no better than the Negro. And some children were spared by hiding because they hid themselves in fireplaces and other kind of secret, squishy places that only kids can fit. Nat thought the violence of all this killing would awaken the attitudes of the white people to the truth that slavery was inherently brutal. He wanted to spread terror and alarm as a message of what else could come. On August 22nd, later that afternoon, the word had gotten out about the roving rebellion, and a white militia gathered and confronted the rebels, who were scared. This caused the forces to become disorganized, and they spent the night near slave cabins and continued towards Jerusalem army in the morning. But they were met with militias and federal forces, actually 3 companies of artillery who were stationed near Southampton, Virginia. Because of this, people scattered. Only one of the rebels was killed at this time, and at the end of the rebellion, the death total is between 50 and 60 men, women, and children. White men, women, and children. In October, Nat had been hiding for about 2 months until October 30th, when he was discovered and captured. That's actually what this picture is supposed to depict, Nat Turner's capture. His confession was given to Thomas R. Gray, a physician, and some places say a physician, some places say a lawyer. So maybe a little bit of both back in the 1800s. And he wrote it and published it. Nat confessed to killing only one woman. No other men, no other children, only one person. On November 2nd, Nat was tried by a Southampton court and sentenced to execution. On the 11th, he was hanged until he was dead. Then he was skinned and beheaded. His skull was kept by a doctor, or said to have been kept by a doctor with a signed receipt, but eventually the skull, with a signed piece of paper saying that yes, this was indeed Nat Turner's skull. Eventually that skull was lost, and others have brought forth skulls saying that this is Nat Turner's skull, but it's kind of hard to prove at this time. No, he was given no formal burial and is likely buried in an unmarked grave. What about the aftermath? What happened after this? Well, after this rebellion, in the time between the end of August and November, approximately 200 black people were killed in retaliation. Some in North Carolina, a whole state away, a militia came, beheaded black people, and put their heads on poles at intersections. And there is still, I think, one intersection named Blackhead Road or Blackhead Crossing, and that was an actual location where there was a head on a pole as an intimidation tactic. The people who were found guilty of participating in the rebellion were either on the light side, sold out of state, or they were executed, hanged, much in the fashion of Nat Turner. This ended all hopes of an organized emancipation movement by kind of reinforcing the idea that black people are scary. They cannot handle the freedoms that we have given them, this little bit of freedom that they had to read and write and all that stuff. And so they definitely could not handle being on their own. This also resulted in harsher laws for Black people. It made it, in fact, illegal to teach any person of color to read, enslaved Black, mulatto, or free Black person. Okay? This led to many Black people being illiterate until the end of the Civil War. Of course, there were some people who taught Black people to read because they could, but those people were breaking the law and ran a risk. So that is the story of Nat Turner. Check in the description for the discussion questions, or if you listen to them at the beginning, feel free to go back. Here's the timestamp, and have a great day, everyone, and thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next week on Black History Highlights. Do good, be good, humans.